Hey there, welcome to Board Game Barrister, our local game shop in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is Tuesday once again, and we are finally back at our Tuesday game table after many weeks because we've just moved into a new store, which is why the walls are a little barren at the moment. That's going to change soon. I'm here with my fellow barristers, Ian, Glenn, Gordon, and Elizabeth, and today we played the Castle Panic, in Big Box, which has all the expansions they've ever made for Castle Panic, some awesome promos, all this stuff, and it was quite an experience. We lost, spoilers. We are going to talk through everything we liked about the game, what makes it so cool, the specifics about what they've done for the big box. But before we all do that, let's talk about how the game plays for a second. Castle Panic is a game where you've got a castle. Your castle is 6 towers and 6 walls in the center of the board, and it's surrounded by forests, and there is orcs, goblins, and all manner of monsters streaming out of that forest trying to destroy your castle. Your goal in the game is to use the cards in your hand, trade them between all your fellow players, and make sure the right people have the right heroes to go out and fight those monsters. If you can destroy all the monsters as they attack your castle before they destroy you, you win. But if your last tower falls, even at the last moment of the game, then you lose together. The expansions add all sorts of new monsters. They add in a cool wizard's tower that allows you to start casting spells. There's a keep where you can install ballistas and catapults. There's a big dark titan, Agnarok, who's trying to destroy you and coming out of the forest. And the really cool Crowns and Quests expansion, which actually introduces quest lines and takes you in totally different storyline directions for the game. So there's a ton of cool stuff in this box.
Alright, so Castle Panic is one of my favorite co-op games, and a couple of reasons. One is I love that encroaching doom. Even when it seems like the board's pretty empty, it's only 1 or 2 draws away, because you've got tokens in there. It's like, oh, I'm drawing 1. Oh, draw 4 more. And all of a sudden the board just becomes overwhelmed. It just doesn't end, and you can constantly shake the bag and be like, there's still tokens in there, there's still tokens in there, and it just keeps coming. And I like also the fact that there's this planning element too, because I can go, I have a green swordsman who does no good. Oh, but this guy's going to move into the green swordsman's turn, in the swordsman next turn. Gordon, next to me, you could use this. You have something I can use my turn. So I like that you can think ahead too and kind of plot and plan out stuff, which might get destroyed by what you draw anyways, but that's the risk you take. I mean, you always have a plan, and when the plan goes away, make a new plan and hope that one works.
And the highs and lows when you're drawing from that bag, like we had times where it's like, oh my God, look at this! It's the monsters don't move, or oh, that's a safe one. That was pretty awesome. Or we had the one of the boulders that came through and it happened to kill a lot of monsters for us and rolled right through the center of the castle. Didn't hurt us at all. Only killed monsters. Like yes. And then other times it's no.
Apparently, there's a lot of garbage in here.
Yeah.
No,
You mark the bag!
It's a Goblin King.
Draw and resolve 3 more monster tokens.
Chimera?
Yep,
Yeah,
that's a
boss,
monster.
yay.
When drawn, breathes fire.
Battering Ram. It's, of course, the Flaming Boulder.
And so today we chose to play the Castle Panic Big Box because 2nd edition of Castle Panic just came out. So they just did this big rollout. All the expansions in the base game are out in 2nd edition. They've updated some cool stuff about it. But the Big Box has everything all in one, so we wanted to just cram it all into one if we could. So the Big Box itself is really cool because it's got all the expansions, but it also has some special promos that I believe only come in the Big Box. There's some promo cards that go into a couple of your decks that are really sweet. There's these promo towers that give each of your castle's towers one little special ability for how you can rebuild it or activate it in certain ways. They all have the Fireside Games logo on the back of them, so they're very clearly these neat little promos you get there. And then the big box itself is laid out, so I should mention there's a crap ton of stuff in this box. Like, these expansions are not small. They are a lot of extra content. So they did us the very nice favor of adding an image on the inside of the box cover, telling you exactly how to put it all away, which is huge. And then it is worth noting that the 2nd edition is not just a, in-name 2nd edition. They have updated all the art for all of the Castle Panic and its expansions. So all of the monsters have fresh art that make them look cooler and more menacing. The actual heroes and the characters, the archers and the knights that you're playing, have this fresh, updated, more modern cartoon look to them that just makes them look really action-packed, and they're always in great poses and take up more of the cards than they used to. So they've done some really nice artistic choices that make the game feel more engaging. Even though I've always loved Castle Panic, the second I opened all this up, I was like, oh yeah, this is everything I always loved, but now I feel even more engaged by it.
Castle Panic is a cooperative game, which means you can play it single player, you against the game, and it plays comfortably all the way up to 6. We played with 5, and we played in the mode, just the basic, everybody's on a team playing against all the monsters, and we played with 5. There's an optional role where one person plays the monsters and plays against everybody else. At 5 players, there's a long time in between turns, and so I think that starts to be a really good time where someone could take on that role of playing the monsters. I think you'll really benefit from that. If you don't do that, I think dividing up the upkeep of the game, one person being in charge of moving the monsters, one person being in charge of distributing the cards and so on, I think that will help keep everybody engaged. Because at 5 players, it can be a little while between your turn. And I think that offloading some of those decisions where one person just plays all the baddies, I think would be a really good benefit when you get to that 5 and 6 player mark.
The big box specifically, adding all these different options and ways to play creates this replayability where the base game can get kind of stale, and it had some game variants at the end of it that Gordon talked about, and I personally really love the Overlord variant where one person gets to play the bad guys, but adding those expansions to it, even if you just do one at a time, which I think is probably going to be the preferred method from what I can tell, because of how nuanced and interesting the different expansions are, allows you to have this replayability and almost an entirely different game experience with your group every time you pull it to the table. That really puts the big box head and shoulders above and buying them either independently or playing the base game. So
Yeah, you could probably take this one box to 10 game nights in a row, and it would feel like an entirely different game every time you played it.
And I will say kudos to including lots and lots of reference cards, and not just one of each. We all had our own reference cards for each of the expansions we played too, plus the base one. This is super helpful, and like we said, we looked a lot of stuff up, but once you have the gist of how these things work, what you have on here is what you need to know.
So the 2 expansions we played today were the Wizard's Tower and Engines of War, both of which are super unique. The Engines of War created these really cool like siege engines for the monsters to attack us with that we had to destroy, and then it pooped out monsters and we had to deal with those then afterwards. So it felt Lord of the Rings-esque where they're slamming the towers into your stuff and you've got to take them out, shoot down the elephant, what have you, right? And then the Wizard's Tower added these crazy monsters that were like really hard to deal with and strong, and spawned a bunch of imps and smaller monsters and really kind of hectic large monsters that we needed wizard spells from the tower to deal with, which are super powerful cards that we got to play with to try and nuke enemies on the board. So together they felt somewhat of an antithesis to each other. It feels like the Engines of War expansion is a slower paced, strategic, the way the monsters siege your stuff down, and you want to build traps and ballistas and catapults and stuff like that to try and slow them down and rebuild your castle with walls and traps and pits, slings, what have you, and try and slow the game down. Whereas the Wizards expansion was speeding it up. The monsters were overwhelming the board quicker, there were bigger things that you had to deal with that were larger health pools, and you were using these super powerful cards to blow up everything. So the two together, I really wanted to lean into being a dwarf and building towers and cool stuff, but I never got to because the monsters were just so hard to deal with from the Wizard expansion that we had to really lean into using those cards. And once we lost the ability to draw those cards, the game overwhelmed us. So personally, I think you could pick either one and play them and they'd be very, very fun. But together it was just a little bit of a push and pull on our strategies.
Yeah.
So
Both amazing in their own right, though. Such cool stuff.
Yeah.
Which is why we picked them.
yeah.
Yeah, like I really wanted to be able to do more of that building stuff, and it ended up feeling like that was just a distraction from the massive monsters that were coming at us. And you saw that in our draws throughout the game, where like, do we want some resources? Nah, we can't use the resources. We can't use the resources.
All right, so nice shot, Chimera. I'm gonna chain lightning these two, and then I'm gonna brick. Build a wall right here,
Rick.
which will instantly die.
Hey.
Everybody else is casting fireballs and chain lightnings, and Ian's over there.
I cast the chain
I
lightning.
know you did. He's coming.
Yeah, build the wall. Build the wall.
The Dark Titan is when you want to have that big bad experience. When you want to have that one big bad monster, as opposed to these. I mean, not weak, but they're not the Dark Titan.
They're mini bosses. Yeah.
They're mini bosses, and this is the big boss. So when you want to have that big boss, the Dark Titan is really cool.
And then, so we'll cover the whole box. Crowns and Quests is its own thing entirely. It basically takes the game in front of you, and while this game still exists on the table, it kind of just adds an extra entire game on the side as well. You as a team are trying to go on quests, and there's separate cards you're going to use for the quests you're going on every time you play. I think there's 12 characters and 18 quests, so you're choosing a separate set of characters to play with, a separate 2 quests you're playing with every time you play. Like, you could play Crowns and Quests in just the base game 10 times and probably never find the same combination, so that one just, if pulling the same monsters and fending off the castle ever started to stagnate and feel a little bit repetitive to you at all, Crowns and Quests just says, nope, this is going to be fresh every single time you play. So really cool add-on. They specifically say, please don't play this with more than one other expansion, if any, because the game would get so dense if you did that. So Crowns and Quests is really just meant to take the base game and say, let's turn this into a cool adventure game and augment it in that way. Alright, well, clearly there is a ton we could say. There's so much in this box, so much to say about it. If you want to watch our playthrough, there'll be a link in the description. You can see how it actually played with the Wizard's Tower and Engines of War expansions. Lots of cool stuff to be said, but in lieu of making this an hour-long review, we're going to leave it there and let you experience some of it for yourself if the game looks cool to you. We had a great time with it. We hope you had a fun time watching. As always, if you want to see our Tuesday videos when we post them every single week, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment if you got a comment, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for watching.